famous poet and activist Pablo Neruda once said, "On our earth, before writing was invented, before printing press invented, poetry flourished." That is why we know that poetry is like bread. It is to be shared by all, by scholars, by peasants, by all in our vast, incredible, extraordinary family of humanity. I started writing poetry when I was 15. Now, it was exactly what you would expect for the most part. It was pretty awful. It was full of sappy lines about love, and I think I desperately wanted my poems to be turned into the next big coming-of-age film. But eventually, once I got to college, I was still writing poetry, of course, but my academic interests are now peace and conflict studies. I soon discovered poets like Maya Angelou and Pablo Neruda, whose work effortlessly tied my two favorite things together, peace and poetry. I knew that others would find connection in these two things because their work didn't only just inform my own poetry, but also the ways that I think and conceptualize peace and peace work. Peace is commonly defined in a lot of different ways. Merriam-Webster has a lot of definitions for peace, but there are three that I would like to focus on today. The first of which, freedom from oppressive thoughts or emotions. The second, harmony in personal relations. And the third, a state of tranquility or quiet. These definitions refer to peace on three different levels, and that's important to note because peace comes in all different shapes and sizes. Now, the first definition, freedom from oppressive thoughts or emotions, refers to an intrapersonal level of peace. This is peace within one's own mind. The second definition, harmony in personal relations, is a little more straightforward. This is peace in the relationships with those directly around you. And the third definition, a state of tranquility or quiet, may seem a little more vague. I take this as a more widespread, global view of peace. For today, I will be referring to this as global peace. A common understanding of peace is that it is a lack of conflict. This definition implies that peace is something that we cannot see. So peace is something that is very abstract. We can see the physical repercussions of conflict because we can view violence and we can view acts of hatred. However, peace is not that easy. We cannot take a screenshot of a scene and say what is happening is 100% peace. This is where poetry comes into the mix, because poetry is more accessible. Poetry is abstract in its own ways, of course, because it takes a bit of thought to extract a theme from a piece of poetry. However, if we use poetry to better understand peace, our conversation will flow much easier. Now, in peace building, it's very difficult to accomplish full peace. This is due to what I call a political BandAid. For example, if two combatant groups get together and sign a ceasefire treaty, this only solves the issue on the surface, as animosity and hatred continue to brew within these groups. Eventually, violence will rear its ugly head once again, and the cyclical nature of conflict will continue. The only way to combat this is by changing hateful ideologies on the ground with citizens. This is where poetry enters this conversation. Because if we can have people open themselves up with those around them and be more vulnerable, we can engage a conversation that benefits everyone. Now, when someone writes a poem, they are sharing their story as an individual. Because beyond barriers, beyond borders and race, ethnicity, gender, we are all human beings with stories to share and stories to tell. At the root of our being, we all seek to be understood, and poetry can help in this way. If we can open up who we are with those around us, we'll have a much more effective and peaceful dialogue with one another. Now, in a means of opening myself up to all of you, I would like to share a poem with you that I wrote last March. This is called Lessons from Loving, and it is my attempt at learning how to cope with the unexpected. No one is going to write the script for you. It will not be easy, but there will be days when you have no choice other than to keep walking yourself straight into fate, even if you know you will combust on the other side of the flames. I used to believe that we were pawns in someone else's game, playing parts in a play that I had no hand in writing, but I am certain no one would choose these complex situations for us and force us to aimlessly navigate ourselves through them. But you know, we all find our messed up ways to move along. Dancing and drinking, kissing people whose names we have yet to learn, indulging in these darker tasks to hide our own darker thoughts. No one would choose that pain for us. To believe that you do not hold the right to your destiny is anything but true. If I've learned anything from loving, it's that loving and this life are both unpredictable, and we all stumble our ways through, somehow, somewhere. Now, when someone reads or writes a poem, they're sharing their story as an individual, and they're experiencing emotions on a vast scale. These emotions, similarly to peace, come in different levels. We have poetry that we can connect to our innermost selves. These are the poems that I write for myself, that I don't feel the need to share with those around me, because it's how I learn to cope with what's going on inside. This is intrapersonal poetry. And then we have interpersonal poetry. This is what I focused on when I was about 15, focusing on the relationships around me, family dynamics, friends, all of that stuff. And then the third level of poetry is what I try to focus my work on now, global poetry. These are bigger conversations that aren't just held with those around you. Questioning societal norms and trends, questioning religion. These are the bigger questions that sometimes you just need to shout out loud and see if you can somehow find an answer. Now, you do not have to work for the United Nations in order to apply these concepts to your life, as poetry and peace both come on different levels. For me, poetry is how I began to understand myself, my feelings, my emotions, those around me, and most importantly, the world I find myself living in. I began to see who I am and my identities in a whole new light, which in turn has made me a much more honest and open individual with those around me. I've become a much happier person, and the relationships I have now are deeper than relationships I've ever had before. And, it might not be poetry that brings you this worldly curiosity, but I hope we all can find what it is that brings us the need for this search for peace. Because poetry has helped me, I know it can help those around me. But this can look like a multitude of different things. This could be singing, dancing, making music, cooking, traveling the world, talking to people who you do not know yet. Whatever it may be, make sure that it is something that you enjoy. Because if you are enjoying what you're doing, you're bringing peace into your own life. And this affects the people around you as well. Inner peace brings peace with your relationships, and in turn, brings peace with the world around us. Now, I believe that poetry can be our eyes and ears into conflicts that we are removed from. Although we may truly never understand something because we are not physically on the ground experiencing what these people are experiencing, we can understand that there is a need for empathy and there is a need for peace. If we can open up and be willing to accept people's stories, we're taking strides in the right direction. If we can engage in an open-minded, honest conversation with everyone, we're bringing a conversation to the table that will benefit everyone involved. Now, before I leave you today, I would like to end with a poem that I think is a beautiful call for peace. This is the ending section of Maya Angelou's amazing piece, A Christmas Poem. We, angels and mortals, believers and non-believers, look heavenward and speak the word aloud. Peace. We look at our world and we speak the word aloud. Peace. We look at each other and then into ourselves and we say without shyness or apology or hesitation, peace, my brother. Peace, my sister. Peace, my soul. Thank you.